Here's today's scenery, rooftop stretch. All right, so let's get right into it. It's more effective to stretch when your muscles are warm. So I like to stretch while activating my muscles as much as possible to get some warmth. And a lot of people want to get skills like the splits. So this is the best way to train for it, is just to try it. So here we go. All you're gonna do is pick whichever front split you're going to do, go to the point that you can control, which for me, I can go a little bit further, but we're warming up, so you're just gonna hold it right here. Hold it along with me if you like, and you're just gonna hold. Your focus is on two different muscle groups here. You're actively pulling your heel towards you with your hamstring, so you're flexing that hamstring, and you're actively driving your toes into the ground for your hip flexor here. Holding and balancing. As the time progresses, you can actually lengthen a little bit by sliding that foot out a little bit further. Holding. Oh, this is such a good stretch. If you've never done this before, you should definitely try this. The goal is around 20 to 30 seconds for an active stretch like this. And that's about good for me. And I usually like to hang out right here for a couple seconds after, before switching on to the other side. Here we go. Other side. Same thing. I'm gonna go ahead and split the leg. So you're gonna be on your heel and you're gonna be on your toes in the back in a split, just like so. Find that balance. Again, you're actively pulling your heel towards you and you're driving your toes into the ground. So your hamstring is activated and your hip flexor is also activated. It's also worth noting that while you're doing these exercises, you want to focus in on your breathing. I like deep, long, slow breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth, but you can do whatever feels best for you. A lot of people have different preferences. Keep that going a little bit longer. Breathing deeply. And relax down if you like, and I'm gonna hang out in this stretch for just a little bit longer. Now, if you have a tighter side, it might be worth it just to hang out in this stretch just a little bit longer. But if you don't, we'll move on. I already feel pretty warm after that, so that's pretty good. But I'm always gonna move on to some deep squat practice right after that, so here we go. All I do is just squat down as much as possible. For me, this is a little bit easier because I've been doing this for a while, but a lot of people, their heels come off of the ground, which is fine. Just go ahead and do that. And all you're going to do is sink your heels down toward the ground and use the floor for balance, just like this. What you're doing is you're stretching your soleus muscle, which is that smaller, deeper calf muscle. I always like to rock side to side. Feel that stretch alternating around. And here's where the activation comes in. You're gonna bring your knees forward until they touch the ground. Once there, you're gonna think about pushing your pelvis away so that your quads are activating. And you're just gonna hold this for a little bit, breathing deeply. I always like to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth, but it's up to preference for you. Couple more seconds here. Around 20 seconds is your goal for these active type of stretches. And come on out of that stretch. And I'm gonna transition to a hamstring stretch, just reaching toward the toes. These are elephant walks when you alternate bending which knees, just like this. So what we're doing while we're doing these elephant walks is we're stretching our hamstring, obviously, but you might feel a stretch into your calves while you do this. And you might even feel it into the bottoms of your feet. And if you do, that's because we're nerve flossing right now. We're letting those nerves slide in between the muscles, the ligaments. And because your nerves, they don't really stretch like your muscles and ligaments do. But they do slide in between, and this helps them do that. Go ahead and straighten both of those legs and flatten out that back as much as possible. And you might not be this far over, you might be somewhere up here, which is okay, just go to that point that you can. And we're gonna bend both of those legs and press the pelvis up, feel that stretch. So we're kind of mimicking eccentric movement by straightening those legs all the way out. And again, one more time, straighten it all the way out. Hold here for a few seconds. 3, 2, 1, and back to that deep squat. And sway, let those muscles relax again. Now, you should feel really, really, really warm after that. So from here, from this point on, I move on to my static stretches. It's kind of raining, so it's a little wet here, but we're just getting it today. Static stretches. So I like to just do that basic sprinter stretch, hamstring stretch. You sit down, bend one leg in, and you're just gonna round yourself forward and grab whatever you can. For some people, they can only grab their knee, their shin, their ankle, doesn't matter. Just grab whatever you can and sink your chest down towards your leg. There's a couple different variations that I do in this hamstring stretch when I do stretch. And again, focusing on that breathing. So we're gonna do probably 3 different variations. Here's the second variation. Go ahead and lift the knee off of the ground so that it's bent a little bit. And what you're going to do is sink your chest onto your leg, or as close to it as you can, and again, reach forward. You should be feeling that hamstring stretch, but in a slightly different area now. Focusing in on your breathing. And you'll notice once we get to the other hamstring that one side is usually tighter than the other. That's totally normal. Instead of stretching more intensely on the tight side, what you want to do is spend a little bit more time on it. So at the end of the video, you can go back and stretch it just a little bit more. We're gonna do our third variation, straighten that leg out. What you're going to do is flatten your back. Now, a lot of people can't flatten their back and hold this stretch right here. So what you can do if you can't is just flatten your back here and walk yourself forward till you get to that point. Pausing and holding that stretch. And you may notice I do little movements. I'm not bouncing into the stretch. Bouncing is not very good, but little tiny movements kind of helps me feel out how deep that I should be going into these stretches. And lift out of that stretch. I always like to shake that leg out. Should feel pretty crazy after that. And we'll switch sides. Bend the other leg in. Here we go. Same thing that we did on the other side. Just round forward and reach. And we're gonna hold that hamstring stretch while we go. A lot of people ask me about my shoes, by the way. I'll leave a link in the description. I'm an affiliate, so if you want to support me, you can click the link, or you could just go to zeroshoes.com. They're barefoot shoes. I love them so much. When you're doing this breathing, the reason why I have you breathe through the nose, in through the nose and out through the mouth, is because I feel like it brings a little bit more focus to the stretch, number one. And number two, there's also some studies that people are doing that nasal breathing is healthier for you than breathing through your mouth. But I don't think the differences are that big. Go ahead and release that stretch, bend the knee, and sink the chest down toward the leg. Feel that stretch in a slightly different area, holding and breathing. I love stretching the hamstrings. If I could just stretch one muscle group, it would probably just be the hamstrings. There's just something satisfying about it. And come out of that stretch. And our last one, straighten the leg all the way out, flatten the back. And again, if you need to push off the ground, go for it. Find that stretch and hold. A lot of these stretches I don't really count the time for. I kind of just intuitively figure it out. And I like that system because the way it works is, especially when one leg is tighter than the other, I can kind of hold it a little bit longer than the other side. Breathing deeply. And come out of that stretch. Shake that leg out. And we'll move on to the opposite side of the leg. So instead of the hamstrings, we're gonna move on to the hip flexors. And I always like to do that with an activated lunge first. So we're gonna be in a runner's lunge, just like this. That leg is active, this knee is off of the ground, so you're actively straightening it. Hold it right here. You should feel that stretch right here, but if you feel the stretch more towards the glute on this side, that's okay too. That just means you're a little bit tighter there, and this is a great stretch for that area too, if that's where you're tight. Good, and next variation, drop the knee down to the ground, point the toes out behind you, and sink these hips down toward the ground, holding. I'm gonna take you through a few different variations. If a variation gets a little bit too difficult, just stick with the last variation through the next stretch. Here we go. Next variation, you're gonna hands on the knees, lift yourself up. Think about tucking your tailbone under. You don't wanna arch your back to get up. You wanna keep a flat back. Think about sinking that pelvis down toward the ground. And if you'd like to challenge yourself even further, you can also reach up overhead. Last few seconds. Oop, falling. And drop down. Good. And let's switch sides. Starting with our sprinter lunge, holding, activating that quad so that the knee lifts off of the ground, holding and breathing. Leave a comment asking for what kind of stretching routines that you guys want, because I know a lot of stuff that helps the back. I know stuff for the knees, whatever you guys need. I'd like to be as helpful as possible in these stretching routines. And I'm also trying to get more consistent on YouTube as well, so look forward to that. Go ahead and drop that knee down. Again, point the toes out behind you. Go ahead and sink those hips down toward the ground. Holding here. Sometimes I get ahead of myself on one side, and I have to remind myself the variations I do. The benefit of doing that workout sort of stretching, the active stretching that we did at the beginning of the video, is that this stretch feels really, really good for me. Especially since my hip flexors historically have been very, very tight. Go ahead and lift yourself up. Next variation, up onto the knees, holding. Keep those hips sinking down to the ground. Breathing deeply. And if you'd like to go into that last variation, here we go. Lifting those hands up. In this one, you may feel a stretch into the abs as well. That's a good thing. And lower yourself down and come out of that stretch. We just need 2 more left. We're gonna do the outer sides of the hips and the inner sides of the hips to finish out the lower body. So for the outer side, we're gonna do a piriformis stretch. It looks something like this. This is actually how I do it, but for most people it's a little easier to do it laying down and holding it like this. But instead of pulling it all the way in, think about dropping your tailbone down to the ground and hold for a stretch. I'm gonna go ahead and lift up and hold it like this. Breathing deeply. So this muscle, by the way, this is your piriformis. There's a couple other muscles stretching obviously as well. But the reason why I like to stretch this piriformis muscle out is because your sciatic nerve actually runs in between your piriformis muscle and your pelvic bone. So when it gets tight, it can cause pressure on it and cause pain to shoot down your legs. And it's called piriformis syndrome, often mistaken for sciatica. And let's switch sides. And feel that stretch. If you're laying down, remember to keep that tailbone down. If you're up like this, just flatten your back to feel that stretch. And again, oftentimes one side is tighter than the other. You may notice that your left leg is tighter than your right leg on this one, and it's usually because driving. Your left leg tends to relax while your right one stays active, and that makes the left one get tighter. But a lot of people have the opposite problem as well. A few more seconds left. And release that stretch. Let those legs relax. We're gonna do 2 more stretches, then we're done. I always go on to my butterfly stretch. Breathing deeply. Round yourself forward. Push those knees open to the side a little bit. And this one's okay to move those knees. You can squeeze them together and push them away. Just get those muscles activated. Especially towards the end of your stretching set, your muscles are starting to cool down again. And like we discussed at the beginning, stretching is more effective when your muscles are warm. But that doesn't mean don't stretch if you're cold, because if you are cold, you can still stretch. Sometimes I like to focus on every exhale. I sink deeper into the stretch. But remember, you're stretching with intensity, but not pain. So find that area for you. Only you can find that out for you. And come out of that stretch. And our last stretch that we're going to do is our pancake. So all you're going to do is you're sitting tall, open those legs as wide as you can go. This is actually, believe it or not, even though I can do my splits, this is as wide as I can actively push it without forcing it. So that's where I go. I grow as tall as possible, so you're flattening the back. And remember, you can flatten your back against the ground if you need to. Flatten your back out, and you're just going to lean forward. If you need to reach, go for it. And what you're going to do is use your legs to dip forward and lift back up. I'm going to do this about 10 times. Breathing deeply, sinking forward and lifting back up. And you may notice that every time you can go just a little bit further. You want to avoid pain. Sometimes it helps to put the hands behind your back. And I say about 10 times because I don't really count. I just follow what my body feels. I'm gonna do one more, and I'm gonna hold it for a little bit longer. I'm gonna hold it right here. Here we go. Breathing as we go. Activating those muscles to hold myself up, lifting up. And now the last one, you're just gonna scoot yourself a little further forward into that stretch. And you're just gonna hold right here for around 20 seconds or so, and then we're done. Thank you for joining me for this stretching routine. Leave a comment, let me know what sort of stretching routine that you'd like next. Couple more seconds. And I like to pull my legs in after a stretch. Good, shake those legs out and walk it off. Stay flexy.